All right, so let's imagine, right? Like way before Google Maps, even before compasses, like back in the day, and you're curious about the world, but not just like your town. You want to know what the whole, like the Earth, what it looks like. And that's where this guy, Eratosthenes, comes in.
And you hit on something really interesting there. With Eratosthenes, it wasn't just about drawing like lines on a map. He wanted to understand the why. Like take Homer's Odyssey, all those crazy adventures. He actually tried to figure out if those places, if they were real.
Wait, hold on. So he was basically fact-checking Homer. That's wild. This is like the head of the Library of Alexandria, one of the biggest, like centers of knowledge, and he's trying to find Cyclops Island.
It tells you a lot about him. He didn't just accept things, he wanted proof. And this was a time when a lot of people, they thought the Earth was flat or like there was this big dome over it.
So he was, what, like a critical thinker, like before that was a thing?
Exactly. And that kind of leads us to his biggest accomplishment. I mean, figuring out the Earth's circumference.
Yeah, I remember like shadows, wells, something like that, but it's all a little fuzzy.
Sure. So picture two cities, Syene and Alexandria, right on the same meridian. Now, Eratosthenes, he hears that on the summer solstice at noon, the sun shines directly down a well in Syene. No shadow.
So the sun's like right overhead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in Alexandria, which is further north, same day, same time, a stick, just a regular stick, it casts a shadow. And that tiny shadow, that's all Eratosthenes needed.
What?
That shadow's angle, it told him the difference in the sun's position between those two cities.
So he used like the difference in shadowed angles to measure the entire Earth. That's next level.
That's pretty amazing, right? He knew the distance between the cities, not, super accurate by today's standards, but still. And with a little geometry magic, boom, he figures out the Earth's circumference.
And how close was he really, using like sticks and shadows?
Way closer than you'd think. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but considering what he had to work with, it's incredible. Really makes you appreciate his genius.
Okay, so he's got the Earth figured out. It's round. He knows how big it is. What's next? Did he make a map?
He did. But imagine a map, like way less detailed than what we're used to. He divided everything into two big land masses. One in the north, that was Europe and Asia together, and then in the south, Africa.
I bet that map looked a little different from our maps today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, huge parts of the world were still, like, completely unknown to him. But even so, his map is amazing for its time.
So back then, most people, they didn't travel far. And if they did, it was probably like walking or, on a donkey or something. And here's Eratosthenes making maps with like whole continents.
Kind of makes you wonder what he thought those places were like, the unexplored parts.
Right. It's like, what did he picture being out there? And that's where those myths and stories come in, I think. Like he took those tales of, far off lands and sea monsters, not as like fact, but as clues, maybe.
Okay, so it wasn't just about like debunking a poem. He was using everything, even stories, to try to fill in his maps. That's pretty cool. Exactly. And, that connects to something else he was into, something we haven't talked about yet. Geology, how the Earth itself was formed.
Geology, like with the rocks and minerals and all that, seems kind of different from maps.
You'd think so, right? But Eratosthenes, he saw it all as connected. Remember those old texts you shared? There's a part where he talks about finding seashells, like actual seashells in rocks, and not near the ocean, like way inland.
Wait, so he's finding proof of like sea creatures miles from the water. What did he make of that?
Well, he thought it meant that the Earth, like the surface of it, changes over time. His theory was that those places, they used to be underwater.
So he's basically like figuring out plate tectonics, right?
Yeah.
Like how the continents move around.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have all the details, obviously. But for his time, it was incredibly insightful. And get this, he actually challenged what other people believed back then.
Really? What did people explain, like finding a seashell on top of a mountain, if they weren't thinking about geology, I mean?
Some people thought that there used to be this huge sea, like covering everything, and it just, I don't know, disappeared.
Whoa. That's, that's a tough one to wrap your head around. So how did Eratosthenes, like, argue against that?
Well, he said, if all that water just vanished, there'd be this massive empty space underground. He understood that water, it finds its level. So where did it all go? It's a great example of him using logic, to challenge what everyone thought they knew. He wasn't afraid to say, hey, that doesn't make sense.
So he's not only, like, making these huge discoveries, he's also changing the way people think. That's pretty powerful.
It is. And it shows that he wasn't working alone. He relied on other people's stories, travelers, explorers, historians, whoever. If they'd seen something interesting, he wanted to know about it.
The notes you sent mentioned this explorer, Pytheas, I think, the one who sailed all the way to, like, Britain and even further. Did Eratosthenes know about his trips?
He did. And this is where that critical thinking comes in again. See, Pythias, he had some pretty wild stories. Like, he talked about this land in the far north where the sun never set, even in summer.
So, like, the land of the midnight sun, we know it's real now, but back then...
Back then, it sounded crazy. Eratosthenes, even though he was, I think, really fascinated by Pythias, he didn't just believe everything. He was always trying to fit what he was hearing with what he already knew, or what made sense to him.
It's kind of like today, right? So much information, it's hard to know, like, what's true. Makes you almost wish things were simpler. But then again, look at Eratosthenes, even with, like, way less information, he still had to figure things out.
That's a good point. Maybe instead of wanting things to be simpler, we should, be more like Eratosthenes. I mean, thinking critically, being curious, but also, like, not believing everything you hear. Those are good skills no matter what time you're living in.
It's almost like he's, I don't know, talking to us through time. Like, hey, keep asking questions.
Right. And can you imagine what he would have done with all the stuff we have now? He was stuck, like scrolls and whatever travelers told him. But we have, like satellites, databases, everything.
Yeah, it kind of makes you want to, go explore yourself. If you could do all that, imagine what we could find out.
Exactly. And that's why his story still matters, It reminds us that wanting to understand the world, it's part of being human. Yeah. Eratosthenes, he got that. And in a way, he helped us see the Earth and ourselves differently.
This has been amazing. Not every day you get to, like, hang out with the father of geography, right?
It's been a pleasure being here.
And for everyone listening, we hope this has, gotten you thinking. And hey, if you want to learn more about Eratosthenes, go check out those old texts. You might be surprised what you find.
Happy exploring.